Welcome to a bonus episode of Capes and Tights. I almost said friends from work, but that's my friend's podcast, so that wouldn't be a good place to start with this. No, yeah, it's a good podcast, but I don't I just listened to the podcast this morning, dropping off my son at daycare, and that would have been great. Welcome to Friends from Work. Well, that's not us. We're not them. You should listen to them, but that's not us. We're Capes and Tights. This is a bonus episode. We're a pop culture and comic book podcast. That's Adam Morrisette over there. I'm Justin Soderberg. We're the hosts of the show. The normal episodes come out every Wednesday. You can find them on Apple and Spotify and all those things, so subscribe. But today we're doing this bonus episode because on Monday, the first 3 episodes released of Y, the letter Y, The Last Man on FX on Hulu, which is confusing, first of all. So that'll be my first gripe. It's not just on Hulu, it's on FX on Hulu. And so that's annoying because whenever you write that, like I wrote this in the description for this episode on the website, and I'm always like, it's not just on Hulu, it's on FX on Hulu, which is annoying. So that's my first gripe. Otherwise, overall, like the show. But let me get into a little bit about the show. So the show is based on a comic book that came out in 2003 through 2008. There were 60 issues called Y, The Last Man. That's weird, huh? And it was put out on Vertigo, which is an imprint from DC Comics, which is funny because I really like it. And I really actually I read the first 10 issues of the comic book too over the past week. And this is probably some of the first DC published work that I've actually read in recent years, which is kind of funny. But it's based loosely on the comic book, which is based on the fact that all of a sudden out of nowhere, every human, mammal, insect, really, anything that had a Y chromosome died, except for one person. His name is Yorick, and his what's the type of monkey? It's a monkey, but it's a
spider monkey. Spider monkey? No.
It's a chupacabra.
Capuchin?
No, capuchin monkey. And that's also a male. So for some reason, this dude and this monkey are the only 2 male creatures in this world that actually survived this, whatever it was. And so now the world is run by women, but which we already know. My life's run by women, so I don't know what this comic book is doing.
Well, my wife and I were joking about how that's such a thing now where it's like, man, like these women characters are really in control. And I'm like, right, because that reflects reality. Because I'm like, have you seen my life?
But on the other side of it, it also reflects some things that are eye-opening almost, like something we need to see in this world as an idea that to talk some generics on this thing, we'll get into that in a second. Let me just go over some things. So Diane Lane's in this. Diane Lane is unbelievable. She's an unbelievable actress. She's been around for many years. I was very surprised when I saw the opening credits and I saw Diane Lane. I'm like, this is gonna be sweet. I like Diane Lane. She plays Jennifer Brown, who's a congresswoman. In the comic book, she gets very upset when someone calls her a congresswoman. She goes by representative, again, more of a gender neutral term, which I like. Oh, by the way, spoilers. This is a spoiler episode, so I'm going to give some things around. She becomes president based on the fact that males all die. Agent 355 is her kind of bodyguard in a sense on the show. She was part of a secret organization, but she is now the bodyguard. She goes by Agent 355. She's played by Ashley Romans. Yorick Brown is played by Ben Schnetzer, and Hero Brown, Yorick's sister, is played by Olivia Thirlby. And Yorick and Hero are Jennifer, the president's kids. Okay, so Yorick's the dude that survived. So just wanted to go over that a little bit on that. But what I was going to say, and part of my notes that I sent over to you on an email and stuff, is that it kind of reminded me a little bit like Designated Survivor, the show that was on TV that ended up on Netflix, with the idea that the next person in line, like the Capitol got bombed and the next person was this designated survivor, which they put off at a different location. So if you lose the continuity of government, this person now takes over. So it kind of reminded me of that a little bit, and the idea that the president, think about it right now in the United States, like this comic book was written in 2003. Currently it makes less sense because if all males die in the world, our vice president would become president. It's very simple. Right. Immediately it's solved. Like we have a president who was actually on the ticket to be voted for. If you go back to the previous regime of presidency, Trump would have died in this. What the hell's his name?
Pence
would have gone.
Yeah, it would have been down to Pelosi.
Yes. And so, but the idea that in this comic book is that it goes so far down that a representative or a congresswoman is the next person in line, a person who is not was not on a ticket to run for president or anything like that. So now she's in charge, and now all the women. But it shows me what I was trying to get at a little second ago was how much this world is run by men.
Yes.
Seriously. We joke about the fact that our lives are run by women. We're smart men, so we listen to our wives and the people around us, our moms and siblings, if they're sisters and stuff like that. But let's be honest, like the idea that most Fortune 500 companies are run by men. Most electrical or sort of serious infrastructure that's in the United States are run by men, and that is proving to be a problem. You know what I mean?
And I want to say I appreciate it. I think they even make like a little like quip about that where somebody's like, "You're president," and they're like, "Well, do you know how many men were in positions of power?" And I think they even come out and make like a quip about it. To drive home that point of like, that's how many men were in line.
Yes, exactly. And that's the same thing with a lot of these different things. And then they talk on the phone about getting a power plant back open. And the lady on the phone doesn't want to do it. Like she's just, I can't do it. I can't do it. I can't do it. And they have to figure this out in a way that reading the comic. And again, so the first 3 episodes came out on FX on Hulu. So they released them all at once. And Adam mentioned before that you kind of saw it as a 3-part pilot, which I understand. It's very similar to when WandaVision came out, where the first 2 episodes were released, because it's like you almost were going to leave the first episode going, what the hell? And so you might have seen that at the end of the first episode, Yorick is just standing in his apartment, having no idea that all the men just died. And that episode would have ended, and next week we would have known what was going on. So I was kind of happy they put the first 3 episodes out to give us that. But to go on that whole, most of the world is run by men, is that in the comic book, they have a place where they're talking about traveling across the country, and a plane that can't take planes because 95% of the pilots that flew planes were in the air when this happened, and they all crashed. And now there's not a lot of planes left because most of them were male pilots. So everything you see is run by men in a sense, like that there's women of power need to step up and take these
which was roles. Really interesting kind of retake on this, because I never read the comics. I did a quick skim of it after I watched the show, and it sounds like they really didn't flesh out women very well at all in the comics. It was very archetypical, like woman as senator, woman as president. And so does this have a female showrunner?
Yes, her name is I had my Siri on my iPad is talking to me.
Oh yeah, mine does that to me sometimes. Yeah, maybe Siri will answer your question. But my point is, like, it's a really smart, really smart rethinking of it. Like, I think that was
Eliza
a
Clark
brilliant.
She developed the show. And obviously that makes sense. And the funny thing is, the guy who wrote the comic book in the first place, Brian K. Vaughan, a dude. And so like he even like took his own thing and was like, I see it from the exterior part of this that we would be we would be up a freaking creek if all men died right now. And I'm not saying that in a self-righteous male thing. This podcast doesn't exist anymore. There's just things that like I understand. I'm not saying this as a men run this world. I'm saying as a bad thing that men run this world. Like we have talked about it over the number of years. It's come to light more recently that there isn't equal opportunities a lot of times. And so that's part of what he's trying to say. And this is 2003 that he did this. So this is even 18 years ago that he started this comic book. It was out there too. It's like, it's cool because one of the reasons why I wanted to do this with you, and we talked about, hey, this would be kind of fun thing to do when we talked on Monday, which was, is because it's not your typical thing. I mean, normally we're going to talk Marvel comic books or your mainstream or big twos and things like this. Is an imprint of a comic book that was only 60 issues but 60 issues that was from 2003 to 2008. So it's like we talk on next week's episode about how it only took six years to make the TMNT movies. This took 13 years after the end of the comic book to get it on TV. And so it is fascinating on that too. So one of the things just quick facts I wanted to show too before I forget about them is, so right now 51.9% of the world's population, according to the last numbers I found online, are male. There is, but in the United States, where this show takes place, in the comic books, the movies, and or the TV show also is, I don't have the percentage right now because I didn't do the math, but there's almost 170 million females and just about 162 males. So in the United States, there actually is more females. So we would lose half of our population if all men died, but we would still have more. There's still more women than there are men. And then Brian K. Vaughan was the writer, and Pia Guerra is the penciler, but they co-created it together, the initial comic book. So that's pretty cool too. So I just wanted to put those out there. But I guess we'll start going further into it now too. Is I like the political aspect. I mean, as you know, and as some of our fans know and the listeners know, I'm a huge Walking Dead fan. So I like this post-apocalyptic, people die randomly world. I do like also, my wife and I really like Designated Survivor. So you have that aspect of political part of the world changing and things need to be done differently. Yep. So I love how this is focusing a lot on the political side of it, because that's something that Walking Dead doesn't do.
And I think that that's probably what the whole thing that stood out to me the most. I mean, the casting is amazing. We'll talk about that later. But the attention to detail for what would be happening in that type of scenario, the background scenes were blowing my mind. There is stuff happening in like every background scene that is huge, like just little details, but like well thought out details that had no reason to necessarily be there. They could have not been there, but like, I always feel like things like this are not done right in like what would a real scenario like this look like? And I think they do a really good job with the political, and just the response to it is just really well done.
And I think some of it also is, we talk about why there was no Spider-Man movies in the 60s or 70s. It wasn't just basically because people didn't want to make them, it's because they couldn't make them. Like there was not the technology to make them look realistic. Spider-Man couldn't swing building to building and make it look real. And so some of this comes down to, maybe this show took 13 years to make because they wanted to make it this way, and no one was going to put the money or effort or time behind it until now. The show looks like a show to me. It looks like if you were to cram these 3 episodes into one, it could be the first part of a movie, whereas it doesn't look like it's made for TV, which it isn't. It's made for streaming, which is, again, a different thing. It's the same thing we're talking about with your Falcon and the Winter Soldiers and your WandaVisions. Those were made with bigger budgets and bigger ambitions, and I think that's is what they need. I do give credit too, because it's a TV show based off of a comic book that not a lot of people knew. Like I wasn't super aware of it until about 2 or 3 months ago, when I heard on a podcast saying, what are you looking forward to in 2021 for TV shows? And someone mentioned Why the Last Man. And I'm like, interesting. Let me look this up. And I was like in love with it, the idea behind it. And so I'm glad they were able to do it on streaming. And the political side of it's huge. The other part, they did some, and I don't want to compare it to Walking Dead because it's not the same. The reason I'm going to compare it to Walking Dead is because it's a post-apocalyptic thing, and I'm a huge fan of The Walking Dead. So I feel like there is going to be these comparisons when I watch it, not on a which one's better kind of thing, but what I did see is this has the more political side, which you don't see a lot of in The Walking Dead. The other thing is you saw like the repercussions of people's kids dying, which is fascinating to me. Like the mom she's got 3 boys, and like there's other people who have like a boy and a girl. And so like when all the males died, at least they had one of their daughters survived, which there's obviously those difficulties in that, because now you have to explain to your daughter what happened. But there's also the difficulty if you have 3 boys and they all die, then you're also now no husband, no kids, and you're alone.
And I think that's what was happening with the power plant, the engineer, wasn't it? Was dealing with like the family fallout, which was a great angle too, of like, I don't know, is family more important? I mean, we're dealing with that in the pandemic right now. I mean, people are having to make those hard choices.
And so, there's that aspect that they did differently. They showed, like, obviously in The Walking Dead, you do see some of that and some of these post-apocalyptic things, but I feel like mostly overall, just to keep people happier, they don't try to show kids dying. You know what I mean? Like they don't, when there's something, when a building gets bombed in a movie, they don't talk about the kids that passed away a lot of times. It's a lot of times it's like, oh, this political figure was in there or whatever. You know, in Wakanda, or the Sokovia Accords thing, when they bombed, when you know, what's his name? Black Panther's dad dies. They don't talk. There could have been a daycare in the basement of that, but they don't bring it up.
Sure.
And so in this show, the first episode, when people start dying, they show the reaction of a daughter in a car watching this person see their kid die. And it's like, okay, that struck a chord with me. I mean, as a dad, it's, you know, as a dad of a boy, it struck
and
a
to
chord
go
with me.
with what you just said, why it's an inevitable comparison. I mean, was it the first episode of Walking Dead where it's the girl, the young girl? And that, I remember, that was shocking.
Yeah.
Because nobody ever did a kid zombie, ever. I mean, the other one I think was like that video game Dead Space that did dead babies, zombies, and that horrified people.
Yes.
So I think the comparison, I mean, comparing it to Walking Dead, I think is fair because they're both doing neat, fun things with it.
And they're both based off of comic books. They were both based off of comic books at the time, weren't like the most super popular comic books in the world, and they're post-apocalyptic. I have started to read a little bit more. Like I'm reading Undiscovered Country and Post Americana, which are both like image books. The problem with those though is like they went to post-apocalyptic, and then they went the next step. They went to like weird mutant creatures and things like that. Right. So like to me, it got to the point where I'm kind of like post-apocalyptic to me needs to be believable. Like,
yes,
I still think zombies in a sense are quote unquote believable because of, I mean, we're dealing with a freaking pandemic right now. So like there is that aspect that people could freaking die and come back and, or at least not even die, but get to this point where they're just like zombified to the point where their minds aren't there and all that stuff. But I like the idea that it's believable. Like this is an actual believable thing that all of a sudden out of nowhere, some sort of chemical warfare designed to attack the Y chromosome could knock out a bunch, maybe not the entire world all at once, but like in Boston, all of a sudden I know where no men live in Boston anymore. You know what I mean? It's more believable than it is unbelievable. And that's why I like this show a lot, because it feels like when you're watching, you're like, this could be real. Like what would happen?
Well, I think the point you just hit on that's like spot on with that is that whether you're looking at zombie movies or a lot of post-apocalyptic films, that void, no zombies, no monsters, no mutants, no magic mystical forces, like it just a bunch of people die, and that's what happens.
And that's the same thing I like to tell people about The Walking Dead when I ask them if they, you should watch The Walking Dead. Oh, I'm not into zombies. I'm like, it's more about the people than it is the zombies. And what this show is doing, and there's obviously going to be villains. There's obviously going to be more people that are going to try to do things, but it's more about how do you survive in a post-apocalyptic world? How do you feed your kids? How do you do this, that, and the other thing? And so you're going to have to make decisions and choices that are not choices and decisions you'd make today. You'd make then because of you're trying to live. Some people do the fine line where they steal from a store, they loot a store to feed their family. Some people kill people, rape people, and keep people captive because it's just like the end of the world has flipped the switch and they become a different person. And so that trying to survive and live in a world that is different than it is now. I mean, there are some things that are obviously better. I mean, they have electricity in most places. Like they can, like at least in The Walking Dead, and who knows, season 2 of this show, if they get to that point, could be that, okay, now the power grids are actually shut down, water's not flowing anymore, and there is that more fall of the world. They could be building it back up in smaller communities. I don't know how they're going to go with it because there's no promise that they're going to follow the comic books continuity like they did. No. I mean, Walking Dead at a point started to veer way off with just pulling in key points. And as I read the first 10 issues, there are some things that they're like, okay, you did this differently. Okay, you did this differently, but I can see why you did it differently. Like I understand it doesn't translate well to a TV show as it would in a comic book. Plus times change. 13 years ago, 15 years ago is different than it is now. Go ahead.
Very different. No, I was just going to say it's very different. I think in a lot of these things we've talked about, we keep trying to put in perspective that like we casually be like, well, let me know 12 years ago, this came out. Like, 12 years ago was, 20 years ago, September 11th, it just happened. I had just graduated college and life is nothing like that now.
No, like, it's nothing. And it's like, we're also dealing with the thing that these are weird is that we're dealing with a pandemic that has, honestly, one wrong direction of this, we could be in a not in a zombie filled world, but a post-apocalyptic world where like, if all of a sudden the entire White House and government got COVID and died, the world would be in a different spot than it is right now. Like it would be if like some of these big leaders, if Putin would have died and passed away, all of that is it could put us, we're in that spot where like one tiny variation of what we're doing right now could be a completely different world that we're in right now.
I don't even want to tell people about climate change.
Yeah, exactly. Well, both ways too. I would say in the same sense, if one tiny little variation of what we're doing now, we might actually be doing this in the same room right now. So the other way too is one tiny variation, and we could be that there is no electricity anymore because something happened. So it is one of those things, and that's why I like it, how kind of believable post-apocalyptic things can be. It's because they honestly, now that we've lived through this, they're more believable than they ever have been. Cool thing from the first episode I know she knows. How would you deal with, Hero, the daughter of the president now, where she doesn't know that she's the president at the time, I don't believe,
Right.
kills someone. So she's having an affair, right? With their, or
Yep.
technically she's having an affair, but really he's having the affair with her.
Right. Correct.
And she gets pissed, slices his throat open, and he dies.
Yep.
She mourns over the entire night. Oh my God, I just killed someone. This is horrible. Like, how am I gonna live with myself? Then she opens the ambulance and all the men are dead.
Yep.
Do you feel remorse at that point still? Like, as a person, would you, like, does she have to live with the fact that she killed someone, even though she knows now that he would have died 24 hours later, 12 hours later?
I think she clearly is living with the guilt as the character. I mean, I think it's clear in the ambulance scene he's getting very aggressive.
Yes.
And so I think, she goes to hit him with an oxygen bottle, and I don't think she's trying to cut his jugular. No. So I mean, doesn't matter. That's its own kind of remorse that she accidentally kills this man. But yeah, no, I mean, I think that's going to become a big arc with her character is dealing with the grief of that. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems like he was a pretty crappy dude. So that doesn't mean she should have killed him, but there were hints that maybe he was a bit abusive too. Because when he gets physical, she goes, "Oh, there you are."
Yes, and then the other side of it is his wife, because there's episode 2, I believe, where Hero meets his wife, because they're at a place trying to find people, and she goes back and gets the license and gives it back to his wife, and the wife is very, at least she knew something was going on. She knew there was another person, and at least she wasn't alone when this happened. But what she doesn't know is that he was already dead when this happened. But it's one of those funny things that I always think about, not funny things, but ironic things, when you find out someone kills someone and then later on you find out that person was dying in 2 weeks anyway. Like when you see a movie or a TV show, it's like that person had cancer and they only had 2 weeks to live and you just murdered them. Now you're going to jail forever. And this person would have been dead in 2 weeks anyway. And so I think that, and I also think that in this, she's dealing with drugs, it looks like in the beginning.
Yes.
And so I feel like that could be a thing where she gets back involved with drugs because of her mental state, because she killed someone.
Right. Yeah, no, I think they did a good job with it though, honestly, just by making it complicated like that there's no easy answer. I mean, yes, he might be an abusive jerk, but she also wasn't trying to necessarily kill him. But does that really matter in the end? Which is I think a realistic for a lot of, doesn't really matter. She's going to have to deal with it anyways.
And I'm not going to go too much into the comic because I also don't want to give away other episodes. But what I will say is her part, she plays in this first 3 episodes, she didn't actually play a big part. She played this like side story as they went from person to person. She didn't really have a big impact on the first 3 episodes, but she does make an impact going forward. Like there is an impact with her in the storyline going forward. And I do see how it connects, I do see where they might go with it because of her killing someone before the thing happened. The tone of the show is great. I'm just going to say that. So we talked, the first episode was kind of slow, but I feel like that's why whenever I talk to someone about TV show, they're always like, I watched the first episode. I couldn't get into it.
Yep.
I don't know we don't know how many episodes this is going. I don't believe. I know on Wikipedia, they said there's at least 7. But most of these streaming shows go 10 to 13 ish, right around there, usually about 10, especially if they're an hour long. I think this one, the first episode was like 52 minutes and there's no commercials, obviously. Is watch the first season. Like that's the biggest thing to me.
Exactly.
It's 10 hours out of your life, 10 episodes. I mean, you and I, this show came out on Monday and we're now recording this on a Thursday and we've watched the first 3 episodes. So like 7 more episodes. Exactly. I'm sure you and I, if the first 10 episodes came out, we could have banged out the first 10 episodes in the past week. We could do it. People do it. So give it a chance. Give the whole thing a chance. But I understand some of these critics out there saying that the first 3 episodes are kind of slower, that they're kind of building up for something. But then a lot of those people who are critics have actually seen the first 6 episodes. And so they did say that as episodes 3 or 4, 5, and 6 come out, that it actually starts to progress further. And so there is that promise that if you did watch these 3 episodes, you're like, well, I don't know, man, that maybe the next 3 will bring it further. And it's the same thing people had a problem with WandaVision. Okay, you've watched the first 2 episodes, you didn't get it, but by the time the end of the season happened, you're like, holy crap.
I think that's a really weird, like, emerging phenomenon, not just because of streaming, but because now we're back to being between streaming and weekly drops. And as you go back and forth between those, they're done differently depending on how you do that. So some people now, like immediately, like you said, think I should be hooked on this. It should be amazing. But other people that are used to weeks are like, no, I'm good with the slow burn.
Yeah.
Like but I could think of a million shows, like you said, where I tell people and they're like, oh, should I watch it? And I'm like, only if you watch the whole thing.
Yep.
Like if you're not going to watch the whole thing, no. Like, and even if they're not episodic, like continuity, I remember when Black Mirror came out, people were like, should I watch it? I was like, only if you watch all of it. The first episode turned 80% of people off of Black Mirror and nobody watched the next one. So yeah, I think we're just in a weird place culturally right now where, we don't know if we want everything now or if we want to parse it out.
So the question I want to propose to you a little bit, Adam, too, on this is,
do
you think we are moving towards episodic week to week, or like having a week break between episodes? I've seen that a lot more recently.
Yeah.
Like I honestly started with Mandalorian when that started coming out. But then I think from that point, there was way more shows. Apple TV Plus, all of their shows have now been coming out week to week with Ted Lasso and Mythic Quest. And when For All Mankind was coming out, all those shows are week to week. There's not a binge thing. You have this episode, maybe, who knows, this show, when this was originally being created, like and talked about and pitched to them 2 years ago, that they were going to put it all out at once. Like maybe on Monday we would have had the entire season, but then they said it's worked. It worked for Mandalorian for 2 seasons. It's worked for all the Disney Plus Marvel shows. It's worked for Apple TV Plus. Why wouldn't we start doing that again to see getting that build and discussion? We may have waited. This discussion we're having right now is because we don't know what's going to happen next. Like,
well, so that's what I was going to say. Like, and I remember thinking that from the beginning when the whole and that was all Netflix, the binge watching, that was kind of their marketing thing. And everybody did it then, but that was always terrible from a marketing perspective, because if you can do weekly episodics, keep people hooked, keep them excited, it gives you a week to do social media. It gives you a week to get people hyped up about stuff. If you do a good cliffhanger, Reddit's going to want to talk about it. Twitter's going to want to talk about it. I found after about 3 months of binge dropping, I just don't care anymore. If it's week to week, I don't know, maybe it will get great. So I want to talk about it.
And we have the discussion all the time we've talked about, we're going to have David Harper on from Off Panel podcast here pretty soon, but he talked about on his podcast about how it has there's this creation of discussion that we lost, that like, if you and I were like, oh, have you watched, I don't know, I'm trying to think of when I was on Tiger King. I'm just going to bring that up because I know it was on Netflix and it was bingeable. I can be like, oh, no, I'm on episode 3. We're like, well, I'm on episode 7. And then you don't remember what happened between episode 3 and 7. Exactly. So you're not like, I can't say anything because I don't know what episode it came into. The other side of that is I think a 10 episode binge is just a long movie. And that's the weird part too. So if you're going to make a TV show, not saying that some of these are okay to binge. I'm sure at the end of this series, we're going to be like, yeah, binge it. It's fine. You can watch it all on Hulu now. Grab it. I tell people with WandaVision, for an example, you should have watched that week to week. It was this, you didn't know.
Absolutely.
There's this discussion of, is it this? Every week, is it Mephisto? But every week it was something different. And I was like, you have to watch it that way. Falcon and the Winter Soldier could have been binged. You could have watched the whole thing probably, no problem. Absolutely. I don't think you had a problem with it. Loki, watched week to week, because again, there was things every week. You're like, I don't know what's going to happen. And so some of these shows that are coming out, I understand. I mean, I didn't watch Game of Thrones. I only watched the first couple of episodes, but I've heard that like same thing with them. It's like watching week to week was you sat down. It was an experience. And that's the other part is that like, I actually was laying in bed last night on Wednesday night that I was like, oh shit. Until I was like, well, I go, we didn't watch What If. I was like, oh my God, I did not watch What If on the day it came out and was sad about it. And I think that's the same thing will happen is next Monday when the fourth episode of this comes out, Monday night, I'll be watching this episode because
it's fun.
A thing for me. Yes, it's a fun thing.
Here's a good, bring this back to our thing. We always talk about being larger pop culture, right? How would you feel if every comic that you get week to week is just dropped at the beginning of the year? Here's 100 issues, have fun. I guarantee you would be mostly done with most comics overnight. If you walked into, Galactic Comics and were like, hey, here's your comics for the year. See you next year.
No.
What?
And that's part of it. I talk about it on the pull list that I put out we put out on here every Monday that I talk about what I'm buying in the week, is that there's certain comics when I talk about it, I say, this week I'm buying this comic book. It's a 5-part miniseries.
Yep.
I wait until the 5th comic book comes out and read the whole thing. But then there's other ones,
absolutely,
ongoing series ones that I'm like, no, I want to read this every month. And every once in a while, before I get to the next comic book, if I know on Wednesday I'm buying, the next Avengers comic book, on Monday I might read the 2 issues prior to that again to set myself up for it and do that. It's the same thing if we were to really watch season 11 of The Walking Dead. I'd probably watch season 10 over again just so I have context going into the next thing. But it's possible that I end up on Monday afternoon watching episode 3 of Why the Last Man again before I watch 4 that night with Taylor. So there is that, getting some context and keeping yourself up to date. I do like shows and comic books that give you a little synopsis at the beginning of the last comic book. So you kind of like crap with comic books. It was a month ago, whereas TV shows is only a week, and it's only a week, people. Like, why are people complaining about this? And you don't have to watch it on that day. That's the other thing. Is the best thing about streaming services is that you can watch it on Tuesday if it comes out on Monday. Like you don't, I didn't miss, this is not the 1990s where if you didn't see the show, you don't see it. You can watch it the next day. Like someone can literally watch the first 3 episodes tomorrow and be happy about it.
And I feel like, again, like back to the marketing thing, I keep thinking, I'm like, if you binge drop everything, I'm just going to get a subscription for a month, watch a couple things and be done. If you parse it out like Disney Plus, like, do I necessarily always want to pay for it every month? Well, I mean, yes, now I do. But like when I first got it, I was like, Disney stuff. Yeah. Fine. Mandalorian's good. Marvel's good. I'll watch that. But now, like, I got to have it. Got to have it every month. Like,
every show is 10 episodes minimum.
Yep.
Right? Exactly. It's at least 2.5 months that you have to, like, if it comes out weekly. And if you do have some of these ones like this one who released the first 3 episodes at once, so that's even 2 months. So if it's what Hulu is now something like $12.99 a month, or will be in October, that's $24 you're getting out of me instead of only 12 or 13.
Yep.
Like, or 26 or 13. So like the aspect of you actually having to subscribe to multiple months. And it's also possible on that because it's the end of the month, it's the last episode out. You might actually get the 3rd month in because you forgot to cancel. And so they're going to get more money out of you by doing it that way too. And then there's other things you fall in love with. I'll be honest, week to week shows or even binge watching shows that are on Hulu, there hasn't been one that's maybe actually turned on my Hulu subscription. I haven't recently been like, I need to watch this, to see this show. I've actually wanted to subscribe to Apple TV Plus for a longer period of time than Hulu at this point. So Hulu needs to catch up. It is a Disney-owned property, so maybe some more of their MODOK style things will be coming out, or this will be coming out. It's just funny because this is a Disney-owned company, basically. Disney owns a majority of Hulu, and this is a DC imprint thing because they bought it. It was probably in the works, obviously, pre-purchase at FX, which is owned by Fox, and then Disney bought Fox. So now it seems kind of funny. It's like it would never be a Superman property anymore. I don't think on Hulu.
No,
a new Superman show on Hulu would not happen. Back to the show. In the week to week thing, but they also in the comic book they do go the whole. What I like about this show and what I will say is one of my favorite things is the starting in the future kind of and going backwards. 6 days ago or jumping forward and telling you how far it is. I like the visualization of the dash marks that you'd normally make if you were counting on your own, but I didn't because Taylor and I were sitting there as that like 5 seconds of that showed up on the screen. I'm like, how many is that? And we're arguing back and forth.
And you're
how many days is that?
You're counting. How many? Is that a month? Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it's 20 days. It's 60 days or whatever. She goes, no, it wasn't. It was 30 days or whatever. And I'm like, I don't know. And so if we just would have put like that or whatever and put 63 on it or whatever it was, I would have been happier with that. So the visualizations are great. That shot in the first episode when they go up and it shows the Y on the
absolutely.
Street,
yep.
Directly from the comic books actually, but not until like issue 6 or 7. Which was really cool because that was cool because I like the Y.
It was
shot.
That's a great example too of, like we said, it's just now that you can do like stuff like that with CGI, it works for stuff like this because it makes the budget realistic and it looks fantastic. But like another show would have never done that if they had to do that live. I mean, find a Y shape, fly a drone, have 47 burning cars. No, never
not gonna happen. No. Would you go in the water after the monkey?
Hell no. Fuck that.
Exactly. Taylor and I like, I don't care. I'm not, I don't care. I'll wait by it, the stairs like he did eventually to wait for the monkey to come back. Ampersand's the name of the monkey. There's no way. He, at one point during the show, he tries the subways filled with dead bodies, diseases up the wazoo, probably. The funny thing,
I just watched that monkey go out by itself and scout for supplies. So don't tell me that monkey can't come back when I call it.
Yeah, exactly. Plus, it was his fault for running off in the first place.
Exactly.
And then after that, because he does go into the the subway and does swim around a little bit, and he sees that freaking thing on the wall that looks like a person, and he flips out. I was like, oh my God, it's not. It's just it's an advertisement on the wall of the subway. But then he goes to the laundromat or the dry cleaners.
That was hilarious.
And I love the fact that they put in there that the first person he speaks to and sees him in months, because he's the only male alive. So he doesn't go out on the streets. He kind of, I don't think at the end of the first episode, he really understands it, because he just wakes up and it's him and the monkey in the apartment. But I think obviously after time progresses, he understands what's going on. And the first person he runs into are these three women at a dry cleaner when he's trying to get new clothes after going into the shitty water in the subway, and they don't speak English. That was like my favorite thing. It's like all of a sudden I know where there's a male standing there talking to females. They don't understand it because they know all the men are dead and they don't speak English, and they have to have a translator, and they're pointing a gun at him, and
they're scared. They got
and he's naked. He's like, I don't like being naked in front of other people.
But it's what you just, and he's like, please, I'd like to wash this stuff off before it like eats my skin off or something.
Exactly.
Because like we'd all be like, oh God.
I was like, of course they run into I love their story writing, and I love that it's almost predictable in a sense that I didn't predict it, because I don't write screenplays or teleplays. But like, it was almost predictable to the point where the first person he's going to run into doesn't speak his language. And that was like hilarious to me. And then the other thing we realized we deal with in this second episode is the transgender. And that was actually in the comic book. Like, there is that part in the comic book.
Yes.
Which is also kind of before the times. I hate to say that, but like, 2003 or 2008, you couldn't be.
That was ahead of the curve. Yeah.
And so seeing that and then understanding the struggle that we go through, like some of these people, this guy in the TV show had to deal with the fact that he was a regular person. Like, no one knew that he was transgender when he walked on the street, but now he has to explain this whole situation over again because he's a man walking down the street, but doesn't have a Y chromosome. So that's why he's alive. And the fact that he has to deal with the fact that he's been taking testosterone injections and his group of people left without them. And he only had one left. So that's a cool, interesting story to go along. And what Absolutely. I do pride Hollywood in is that he actually is Elliot. His name is Elliot. The actor is a transgender person. So, which
is huge. And most people realize that they almost never do that in Hollywood, which is absurd.
Which is like what they wanted to do on, you ever seen the show? I can't remember the name of the show, but it's Ricky Gervais has a show about a guy with a dude who has, is it MS? Or whatever, but he wanted to hire someone who had not Ricky Gervais. It's Jim Jeffries. Wanted to have a show with a guy with MS or whatever, but he wanted to actually hire someone with MS. And because of filming laws and labor laws, they couldn't film for the number of hours they wanted him to do it. They had to hire someone, have him fake having a disability. And I understand that side of it, but if you're gonna have a transgendered person in your show and there are actors that are transgender, I really am proud of the fact that this company and this creators would hire and cast a transgender person to play a transgender person. Like, this stupid not to do that. Like, it'd be so offensive. It would be so offensive.
And yet it's done all the time. People would be shocked but yeah, no, I noticed that too. And I thought, and that whole storyline is just a really great one to see play out, is the changing now. The friends, there's not access to medicine, so now he is going to start transitioning back to a woman. And what that transition will look like now, it's a very dangerous place to be, and that reflects what we're trying to get at in general, right? So well done on that. I mean, I think the showrunners is doing a great job with stuff like that.
And it's great. And also Brian K. Vaughan and Pia Guerra are executive producers in the show too. So they are involved. Sure, that's kind of like Kirkman was for Walking Dead. So they are involved in the sense of making sure it goes the way. I'm glad Ampersand the monkey did come back. So to spoil that too, if anybody's listening to this, you should obviously not be listening to this right now if you haven't watched it. But the monkey did come back, which it's a CGI monkey, right? Or is that a real monkey?
No,
I didn't look it up. But there's times that look like CGI. It might be that there's a mixture. There might be at times when you're getting it to do specific things, then it's CGI when it's not. I just felt like it was one or two.
I think it's
one or two interactions that Yorick had with his monkey that it seemed like fake, but it also just could be the way it was filmed or whatever.
I don't know. I don't know what the going rate for a trained capuchin is these days.
Which, I mean, out of anything, I mean, if it was a random thing, if you had a tiger, like it was in Walking Dead, if you had a tiger, they obviously had a CGI tiger because there's no you can't just find a tiger to act in a show. Capuchins, I'm guessing, are more Hollywood anyway. Like they have one.
Well, in general, this is a big talk in film now too, is like, it's probably time to just go to CGIing animals. It's not really cool to ask them to be actors in movies when we don't need to do it anymore.
Unless it's like a dog walking, like you have a dog who just happens to be in your house. Like if you're actually on the show.
You have to have like 4 of the capuchin monkeys that all match, because you have to rotate them out through different shifts. And I just feel like at that point, that's not fun for anybody. So
they made a Lion King movie with CGI that had all animals in it. Why can't we do a monkey in a show? You know, it's honestly probably cheaper too.
Yes.
I mean, CGI nowadays, the cost of CGI is way cheaper than actually probably hiring a monkey. And then you have to hire the renders. You have to hire the insurance probably.
I imagine a lot of this stuff now is almost stock too, like a stock 3D CGI monkey. I mean.
And then you just need a really, really, really tiny person to be in a motion capture.
Yes. Exactly. Very tiny.
That's where we hire babies, right?
Yeah. There we go.
That gets around the labor laws right there.
Exactly.
The funny thing too in episode 3, so episode 1 and 2 and 3, we're trying to talk about this as a generic as we get closer to the end of this review of the first 3 episodes, is as a generic whole picture. I mean, they released it in that way for a reason. I think there's multiple reasons they do that nowadays. Excuse me. They did it with Invincible on Amazon too, which was kind of like get you trapped by binging some of it, but then watching week to week after that. But I also feel like sometimes they're again, this show may have been written and designed to be released as a binge show. They changed it afterwards.
Sure.
And so getting that first 3 episodes together to get you cooked could also be in. But I mean, the first episode was great. Second episode was great. I honestly think all 3 episodes were great. I do think having the first episode and getting involved in it was great. And then the third episode had a lot more progress in it. And I really like Agent 355. I think she's excellent in here. I think the first episode, she walked away from that building as it exploded, and Taylor and I were both like, what the hell? This seems so obscure. But then you realize that she's an undercover agent, and she's she became more of my favorite character in the show once episode 3 came around than it was in episode 1.
Which is why I think the 3 episode thing really worked. I mean, it would have been hard to introduce Yorick, Diane Lane, and Agent 355 just as 3 characters.
Yes, exactly. And so I think that she's great. She's actually, I think she's going to play a big part in the future of the show. I love when he gets finally in episode 3, he finds, or his mom finds him. She sends the president sends Agent 355 and those 2 pilots to go find her daughter, because she doesn't know that her son is alive, obviously, because all the males are dead at that time. So they can't find her daughter, but they end up stumbling upon. It must have been I couldn't figure it out at first, but he was in his sister's apartment. And so
and he was leaving signs everywhere.
Yes. And when Agent 355 found Yorick, they brought him back to Washington, D.C. or wherever. They're not in the White House. They're in the Joint Chiefs building. In the comic book, they're actually in the White House, but in this TV show, they're not. They're in the Joint Chiefs of Staff conference room or whatever it would be, war room or whatever. And so they find him, they bring him back. So the mom is like, oh crap. So then he eats for the first time a lot of food and he pukes. And I laugh at that because I'm like, I love that kind of writing because it's truthful. You don't just eat food and you're like, oh cool, eat food. A lot of us, if we haven't eaten well in a long time, we'd eat a ton of food and then we'd puke because we ate too much food. So that's what
I think that was the details I was talking about before, that I was like, that did not need to be there, but the fact that it was there is.
And that's part of my love for certain comic books that have a lot of dialogue back and forth. Like I'd honestly rather see like Wolverine and Magneto having a conversation at a table over a cup of coffee over a lot of battle scenes in an X-Men comic book. I just feel like there's more depth in that. Like battle scenes are easy to do and write because it's just like one person fighting another person, but having actual drawing you in with somehow and just having a conversation at a table, it does it for me. And that's the small things about how like he's puking and she says, I told you shouldn't eat that fast and that much. And I was like, that's exactly how all of us would do. All of us would do that. It's actually, if all of a sudden I know where someone's like, this last bottle of Jack Daniels, I think all of us would chug it that night. And then we deal with the repercussions of why you did that. I guess there's the biggest sore thumb or a sore eye on this thing, whatever you want to call it, is when the daughter goes out back, not the daughter of that woman. I forget her name and I forget what context she gets. She works at the White House. She tries to get back into the Joint Chiefs of Staff. They won't let her in. And they go back to her house and her son and sons and husband are dead in their backyard. And the daughter runs out there to shoo away the crows, and she falls and she slices her leg open. Not one tear, not one tear, not one cry. It was like, we've got to go bring you somewhere before you get infected. And you can tell that also the separation between that mom being a mom and being a business person, because she goes, did you get your shots before camp last year? And she doesn't remember that. And it's like, okay, a mom who pays attention to her kids more would know that. But then the kid just like, it goes, no, we have to bury them. And she falls, slices her leg open, and then she buries the kid, the bodies, and like, okay, this kid could die. Like, there was just that was the weird part to me. And I don't know if we're going to learn more in episode 4 of like what happens. Maybe the kid does get an infection, loses a leg, or dies.
Right.
But like, and then she gets it's
that
more,
character's definitely the weakest thread right now, though. It just doesn't. So far, it doesn't even like even her going back and them being like, we don't know you, wasn't a big deal, because my first thought was like, of course they don't know you and they're not going to let you in. Like, what?
But then like that to me was like the biggest thing was like, okay, come on, like give us some emotion, have the kid cry a little bit. Maybe when she's like, okay, we'll do it, and then the kid, you don't see the kid again. Like, she just buries the bodies and then they leave. Like, you don't like the kid. What is this? The kid's not even gonna lay outside with the leg wrapped up so the kid can be paid attention to by the mom. It was a weird thing, and maybe we'll learn more, and that we haven't seen the whole picture of the whole season yet. To me, it was just the weirdest part of the entire first 3 episodes. I just stuck out to me that I saw that.
I'm ready for a pretty hard left turn here at some point in this story. I did read in the original comics there was a bit of a supernatural element, and there sounds like from even what I've read, but they're very much trying to avoid that with the show, which I think is smart.
Because I think it's grounded. I think right now, as we see it, it is more grounded, and I think that there's that future of this. The last thing I think we do before we wrap this up and say we definitely, and obviously I think we're both on the idea that you should watch this whole show. I mean, this show is a good show. I like it because it's post-apocalyptic. It fills some voids. It's not superhero based, but it's comic book based. I like that. The future of it looks good. Do you think so? In the towards the end of the episode 3, we're going into episode 4, kind of a cliffhanger, is Yorick finally meets his mom and sees her, and they are trying to find this Dr. Mann, which is kind of funny. I love that play on the fact that her name is Dr.
That was
Mann. Funny. That as a geneticist or whatever, she's cloning people. She's cloned in the comic book, the first comic book, maybe she's going into labor when all the men die, and she's going and giving birth to her clone. So that's the weird thing that I don't know if they're going to deal with that in this or not, but that was weird. So they're going to see this person, and they fly the helicopters, and the 2 pilots that found the man, Yorick, obviously are like, what the hell? Like, they don't know. And all the people outside are like, if anybody finds out, they're going to storm there saying that the president saved her only son.
The president's son is okay.
Yeah. And it's just it's obviously a good storyline. It brings drama and anticipation on this, but they fly away to go find Dr. Mann in the helicopters back away. They say Agent 355 says, I know how to fly. Let me fly we need diversions and all that stuff. And then the other helicopter with the 2 pilots in it blow up. Did Agent 355 blow that helicopter up?
Right now, I say absolutely, but I think that might be one of the hard turns here that might play out later. But yeah, right now, I think they definitely want us to think that she did,
because the pilots wanted to say something. Like, it sounded like the pilots like, this can't be kept secret. This is the only man, but they also know the situation, what would happen. And so Agent 355 didn't stay in the same helicopter with this person. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, this helicopter gets shot out of the sky in a sense. And Yorick and Agent 355 are in the other helicopter. That to me was just like, oh, I love that. And that's what I liked about the first 3 episodes being released and still left on a cliffhanger. So, like, you still have this like, oh my God, I can't wait till the 20th, because that's going to be amazing to find out.
And I didn't research that enough. Do we know what metals specifically she gave them?
No, I don't. And that's probably part of it, because it's one of those things.
Because I wondered if the hint was that those were for them dying for the cause.
Yes.
And that's kind of when she gave them, I was like, oh, that's not good at all.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's it, but if it is, I thought that was a pretty good play on that.
Yes, I think it was great. And I think that it's one of those crazy things that, like, if you and I were privy to this information, we'd want to say something, but we also know the repercussions if we did say something. We also want answers. And obviously we're not going to, I feel like I don't know, because I haven't read the whole comic book yet. I don't know if we're ever even going to find out answers. I know in The Walking Dead, for an example, we never really know why the zombie apocalypse started. And Robert Kirkman has said that he's never going to say why. It's just, it happened and it's there, and it's not the point.
Full disclosure, I love, man, and good writers that do that well understand that, like, you and me, and like, we can imagine whatever we want to fill that gap. And that's the fun part.
Yeah.
Like,
but I do think that if I did end this show after 4 or 5 seasons, or if I did read the comic book and I didn't find something out, or even an idea of what happened, like at least in The Walking Dead, they don't really touch on it ever. They have at one point they have someone who says, you know, I think I know how to fix it. At one point, someone says something else, but like even in the Fear the Walking Dead, which is kind of the prelude to The Walking Dead, they just all of a sudden know there were zombies. Like it didn't actually show what happened. Right. And so, but I do wish that they at least have some theories in this show. I hope that they'd have theories of what could have happened, and that's where I wish it goes. If they never actually definitively tell you how, or how they save it, or how they repopulate it, and at the end of the seasons of the show, we're just now in a world with nobody in it anymore because all the women were there, but they couldn't. You know, Yorick dies and they can't reproduce, you know, people anymore.
Yep.
That could be a way they go, but I don't think. I think at some point we'll find out at least either why or theories on why, which I hope we do.
Yes. And I think too, it's like, we'll see as it moves forward. I think this is going to have a bit of that Walking Dead thing too, of that people are going to die and it's going to shock us. Like, you know, and that works well in apocalyptic stuff. So I'm anxious to see how that plays out. Like, you know, are we going to like lose Agent 355 like in episode 4? Like, I don't know.
I won't go any further on it. She's not dead in the comic books as far as I am in the comic books. I'm 10 issues in, but she does fall at one point and hit her head. And at that point, I'm reading the comic book immediately related to the TV show. I'm like, no, I thought she did die. Like they just showed her like laying on the ground with the blood like dripping off of her head. And I'm like, oh, God damn it. I like her in the TV show. I didn't care about her in the comic book as much. I just knew her in the TV show. She was awesome. So I'm like, if this is where we lose her, I'm going to be pissed. But you know, we'll see. And as of right now, they said there's 7 episodes have been announced. So we'll see how far. I didn't read any further because I didn't want to have my opinion too morphed on other people's opinions. And so I didn't look up too much, but maybe I'll look up some more after this. Is that I know of for a fact there's at least 7 episodes being talked about, and there's titles on them on Wikipedia. And the first 3 episodes are now. So at least have 4 more episodes to discuss. Yeah. And you know, I wanted to do this, and we talked about wanting to do this to get a kind of a brief thing, because I do think this is a show people should watch, and I have promoted it to other people when I've talked to. You got to watch this. You get Hulu, you got to watch this. But maybe we'll just put a roundup discussion in another podcast, a regular podcast. We're talking about something else, and we'll just be like, okay, we're going to start off this episode by saying, let's talk quickly about the rest of the episodes on season 1 of Why the Last Man, and then go into the next thing. But I think this is I think it's fun too, because it's like for this one, when we see opportunities, you and I, neither of us had really any big back knowledge of the comics. Yep, exactly.
And if you're like me, when I jumped in, like I haven't read any reviews. I've read like, you know, summaries of backstory and stuff I should be looking for, but I'm trying to read no reviews coming into these, because I'm like, I start realizing how much that influences my thinking, and it's dumb. So exactly.
And I've done that over the years, like having to do that when I used to write for sports. I used to be like, I'm not going to look up anything about this person. I'm just going to write what happened in the game and then fill in maybe with other stuff. But if I don't, I'm going to go completely on a route that someone else already talked about. I need to be new and based off of. So, but I think it's a great show. I think it's got a great progression. Like I said, I do agree with some of the critics that I said, like the small pieces of lines I've said that the first 3 episodes I can understand. And then hopefully it goes faster than this. But even if it doesn't, I like the progression it's going. I like the like I said,
I do too.
It doesn't have to be showy. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to have all the answers in every episode. I think the idea that an entire season gives you a cumulative view on the entire world that we live in this show. So I don't have a problem with that, but
no. And I think to tie it back to something you said in the beginning is it kind of out of the gates, it has the shadow of Walking Dead to deal with. Like it has to break through that and show people it's something else, because wait, you love Walking Dead. I haven't watched it in the last season or 2, but like that's a big thing to break through, and people are going to watch this right away and go, oh, this is Walking Dead.
Yep.
And it's
Walking
not.
Dead with minus zombies, minus men. That's like, you know, but
so,
the comic book has also gone up in value because of this. Obviously, we know that, and a speculation mark. But I was also saying to Paul yesterday when I was at a shop that we should probably, people, if they're out there looking to speculate and buy, obviously issue 1's going for like $350 now. But go out and buy issues 2 through 59.60, because in The Walking Dead, one of the things we realized that people all went after issue 1, but when Michonne got introduced on the TV show, issue 19 then went up in value. So if you're looking to speculate, buy these random issues that you might know that a first appearance is showing up, because once that first appearance shows up on the TV show, that's the comic book that actually is going to be worth some money too. And number one might be unachievable. $350 for a comic book that may be worth that much money in years. You know, this show could get canceled.
Tabs, like, for our listeners, if keeping tabs on stuff like that is difficult, and it is because we're all busy. What is it? Key Collector? Is that the app we both use?
The app you can download.
Key Comic Collector. I mean, even if you just kind of keep tabs on it, it'll give you a good idea of how comics respond to what's going on in larger pop cultures. So
exactly, it's a great app. It's free. For most of the things, there are some paid features on it, but it's free. And those guys, I mean, that guy created that in his basement, basically. And he went over and they basically have like first appearance of artists, first appearance of characters. And then Why the Last Man is actually one of the hot issues that are out there right now. That going for about $350 on eBay right now.
Now, it's one of the better comic apps I've used in a long time.
So cool. So that's Why the Last Man on Hulu, or FX on Hulu. It's based off of DC's imprint, Vertigo, which doesn't exist anymore. With Brian K. Vaughan and Pia Guerra. That's pretty funny how it's not existing anymore. Now there's a TV show, but
of course,
it's also a DC imprint thing that I like now. Oh, this is weird.
There you go.
We're morphing and
Vertigo,
and growing as a person.
And Vertigo always did some great stuff. I mean, they had Sandman, Preacher. I mean, so like I get it's a totally different brand, at least as far as culture. No, so I mean, I totally get that. Well, we won't call you DC converted yet.
Not yet, but we will get there. I'm trying to grow on that too. But not that I won't. I just don't.
Exactly.
You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Capes and Tights Podcast, and on Twitter, Capes Types Pod, and we're on Apple and Spotify and all the other things out there. You can find us at Capes and Tights Podcast on all those places as well. So I hope you guys follow us. New episodes every Wednesday. This coming Wednesday is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles original trilogy movies.
Heck yeah.
So that was a fun one. You know, I'm excited for you guys to see that and watch Why the Last Man. Tell us what you think too. It'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
Sweet, man.
Yeah, totally. Send us in your comments and replies. We're waiting so that we can respond to you.
And if you have some theories, we like theories. So tell us about theories and we can talk about some theories. And maybe as the weeks progress and we do another one, obviously next week, we already have recorded for Wednesday, but maybe as we progress further, we can give us little updates on what we want as the show is going on as well.
Exactly.
But that's our first TV show initial review, and we'll get some more going for us. But
I like it.
Nice to talk to you, Adam. It's always nice to talk to you.
Always. Cool.
Have a good one, guys. Thanks for
let's do it again soon.
Absolutely, man. See you guys.
Thanks, guys.